become a way to, as the name implies, take a first look at emerging technologies, and especially off 3 leading campuses in the Milwaukee area. It is a great example, I think, of the rise of R&D throughout that region, that the collective power behind what's going on at these institutions, I think, speaks well for not only those institutions themselves, but in fact, the whole region and where it's going to go, and how its future is going to be, at least in part, defined. And so, and I'll tell you a little more later about the panelists who are going to hear from each of these companies. But that will be coming up. We've got 2 folks who know the investment world very well, Dana Guthrie and Scott Button, and John Lewis, who does a lot of work on the corporate side, looking at emerging companies and ideas and products. So with that, I want to start by introducing Mark Money. Mark is the chancellor at UWM, a friend. I mean, God, I've known you for a long time now. I mean, it's great going back over the history of everything. Mark has been a part of the succession around interest in building that R&D capacity and entrepreneurial capacity at UWM. Been there since 2014 in this current role. So welcome, Chancellor Money.
Oops, there we go. Tom, thank you. It's such a great honor to have you serve as moderator of this program today. We're thrilled to have you, and for us to have our friendship that goes back a long time. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Tom Lujak was doing a little history of his program. He's done over 800 shows, and his first program was featuring me in 2001 on Techstar. So that's when you and I probably started working together. It goes way back, but Indeed. It's kind of interesting perspective over what we've done and how we've accomplished so much in this region. And It's truly the partnerships. And folks, I'm just so happy you're all on the program and able to join us today because, as Tom and Jessica have said, this is exciting work. It's incredibly collaborative. I'm also really pleased to be able to share the opening intro comments with my wonderful colleagues, Dr. John Raymond and President Mike Lovell. The work that MCW and Marquette University and UWM are doing together really has helped create for this region of Wisconsin an amazing number of innovations, a number of things that you've heard about in terms of the work that we're doing through the Clinical Translation Science Institute, from as we say, lab side to bedside, to really work on innovative practices there. The kinds of work that we've done, not just recently, but for a long time with Marquette through the Water Equipment Policy Center, through the types of things that we're doing through the IUCRC, collaborative work that helps industry and innovation. Pretty amazing things. And so it's a real honor to be here with the 3 institutions today. And that in no way should take away from anything that's happening at our other incredible institutions. Milwaukee School of Engineering is doing some great things. Concordia University, pharmaceutical stuff, great things. And we could go through other academic institutions. But today you've got the nucleus of some pretty important federal funding, some amazing things that are happening that marry up with industry really nicely. Many corporate entities tell me frequently that their R&D investments are not where they used to be. They're not where they need to be. And the only way they can advance is through the partnerships. We have brought WEDC to the table. We've brought the Joint Finance Committee to the table. We've had a number of different audiences with CEOs testifying to that effect. It really is the amazing things that are happening at the medical college, at Marquette, at UWM, that are propelling a lot of amazing types of partnerships. Our tech transfer offices, they're critical for this. And so for those of you who are working in those areas, it doesn't happen if we can't get from the faculty to the different types of licensing, the different types of commercialization practices. So it really is a team effort to make this work. So I'm really pleased to be here. Always love making these visits and appreciate everything you're all doing together. Tom, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Chancellor Money. Well, another important introduction, Dr. John Raymond, who I believe is with us as well. Dr. Raymond is president of the Medical College of Wisconsin. He's been in that role now for about 11 years. And, getting back to the Tech Council, of course, the Medical College of Wisconsin was one of the founding members of that. So welcome, Dr. Raymond. And yeah, thanks for joining us. Let's hear your overview.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks so much for moderating. It's it's always a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for your leadership. And also thanks to Mark Money for his always gracious acknowledgement of the importance of collaboration and the great leaders that we have here in town. And it is an honor for me to serve alongside Mark Money and Mike Lovell in this collaboration, and also just in trying to lead higher education and healthcare through a very challenging time for all of us. Mark mentioned the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, which has been the recipient now of 3 funding cycles of the National Institutes of Health Signature Collaborative Grant, meant to do translation all the way from the bedside to products. And, you know, Mark said inside, outside, and there are a lot of ways to characterize it. But I think here in Southeastern Wisconsin, what's unique about our CTSI is that we've brought together 8 different institutions to form a virtual university. And our collaborations are focused on leveraging the strengths that we each bring, on collaboration, and delivering value as rapidly as possible to the region, the country, and the world. And again, just following Mark's themes, we want to acknowledge these other partners. And just looking at the presenters, I note that we have individuals who also have ties to the Zablocki VA Medical Center, Children's Wisconsin, the Blood Center, and Freighter. And so that, you know, is really important. And Mark mentioned MSOE, which is our partner. So this is great for our region. Again, I just want to say it's an honor to be here. I want to thank and congratulate our faculty, and especially thank those in the private sector that are helping our faculty learn the language of collaboration, partnership, and entrepreneurship. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Raymond. Very good. Well, yeah, really appreciate your work as well. And last but certainly not least, Mike Lovell. Mike is the president of Marquette University, an engineer by profession, and has brought a lot of that kind of knowledge to the table as Marquette continues its rise in terms of what it's producing, what its researchers are doing to really advance things all around science and tech. So, President Lovell, good to see you.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Tom. And thanks for the introduction. And again, thanks for your leadership and helping bring all of us together to have these important conversations. And one of the great things about going third is I can be brief, because my great colleagues, Mark and John, have done such a good job outlining the importance of today and what we're trying to accomplish for this region. I also want to thank Kalpa Vithalani. She's our Executive Director of Technology Transfer, and has really helped our efforts in these areas, and was the one who invited me to speak today. You know, when I think about the First Look Forum, you know, I go back to my days at UWM. I always felt this is a great opportunity for all of us to learn and help shape the latest innovations that are going on in our region. And I've always been very, very proud of the work that our faculty have done to develop some amazing technologies that, quite frankly, you know, have the ability to change the trajectory of Milwaukee. You know, at Marquette, we continue to be committed to developing technology and doing research that will have impact on the lives of others. And we recently, a few years ago, launched a new Office of Economic Engagement. That group is led by Paul Jones, and he was formerly at Harley-Davidson and the general counsel, and really did their external affairs. And for those of you who don't know Paul, haven't met them, I will encourage you to reach out to him, because you know he is doing a great job trying to position the university to be a great partner, not only to our industry partners, but to others in the region that may benefit from working with some of the expertise that we have on the campus. Today, you're going to hear about some technology that was developed in our Water Quality Center. And I think, as Mark pointed out, it's important to note that the underpinnings of this technology and this work actually came from a collaboration between UWM and Marquette, and through the NSF-sponsored Water Equipment and Policy Center. And again, it just shows that how through these partnerships, which also include a number of corporations in the region, we can continue to make a big impact in developing technology that will improve people's lives. And it's really through these strategic endeavors and working together that I have great hope that we will better serve our community and really have thought leaders see the opportunities that are available, by finding ways to team with those with like interest in the region. And so, and again, I want to thank UWM in particular, because I believe the first set of these forums were primarily driven by UWM. Now it's great to have MCW and Marquette to be involved to make the connections we need to make our region better. And I just want to thank everyone who's involved today. For those doing the technology transfer, those doing the research and technology development, to those on the corporate side that want to be partners. I just want to thank you for putting your effort into this in your time, because again, it is so important to help position Milwaukee for a bright future.
Indeed. Well, thank you. Thank you, President Lovell. All three of our introductory talks have touched on some important pieces: collaboration, not only among the institutions that are represented today, but elsewhere in Milwaukee, as it was noted. MSOE, Concordia are among those who are doing some great work. And then beyond, I mean, there's a pretty increasingly well-worn path, it seems to me, at least digitally, between Milwaukee and Madison as researchers here and Wisconsin's largest city get together. And I think investors are also taking note of that as well. So that's great. Well, now we'll get underway, and I'm excited that Jessica Salvaggi really kind of summarized this well with the notion that it's 7 minutes in a cloud of dust, and then a response panel that's going to take a look at each one and ask some questions, hopefully make some comments, have some observations, and again, that notion of how's this going to impact people. They may not be companies yet, but who knows? They may be in time be companies that will have products that can reach everybody. But right now they're great research ideas and have the potential to do so much more. So that's going to be the lineup. We're going to hear the presentations. We'll hear from the panelists, who I'll introduce further after the first presentation, and we'll get through it. Now, by the way, if you're an audience member and you've got some chat questions, feel free to lob those in, and we'll take a look. And if we've got time after our panelists complete their comments, we'll go back to that. So first up, Kyle Jansen. He's director of the Prototyping Center at UW Milwaukee. He's going to talk a little bit about self-adjusting dust collector for automated routing. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you so much for having me. And speaking of collaboration, I think we have a little bit of a thanks to President Mike Lovell for his efforts about a decade-ish ago to kickstart the Innovation Accelerator, where the UWM Prototyping Center is, where we're housed out of today. So a neat little tidbit about the tight-knit community we have here. All right. And everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Kyle Jansen, and I am the director of the UWM Prototyping Center. I'm a mechanical engineer and also an entrepreneur, heavily involved in another UWM-based startup, which is why this system I am speaking to today has been actively collecting dust. And hopefully you understand that joke in a moment, for the past couple years since its inception. So we all remember Thomas Jefferson's 3 certainties in life quote, where he said, "There will be death, taxes, and routers make dust." But I really think after this, you'll focus on the first 2, probably more famous ones, because I'm here to say that routers used to make dust. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the dust collection system we have on our automated router on the left compared to our unique system that we've developed on the right. This was born out of a need because I didn't want to spend time babysitting our CNC router when making parts. And you can see the massive improvement in terms of cleanliness that our device has. And we're not going to show the whole thing, but you can see that we don't have to pause the machine, for example, to stop and collect dust, not only while we're cutting, but afterwards as well. This makes a tremendous impact, which I'll get to throughout the presentation. Here's one of the clients we visited, and you can just see the mess that they've made in creating a single part. Imagine being the operator, having to go in there and clean this up part after part. They weren't satisfied with their dust collection systems. Here's another plant I walked into in basically a haze of smoke and dust. And I was shocked thinking that they felt this was normal. And I was concerned for their health as I wouldn't want to be breathing this in every day. But without any dust collection systems, this is kind of the way it is. So to introduce you to what a CNC router is, CNC means computer numerical control. And it's automated machinery that's capable of making a lot of the parts and equipment that we use in our daily lives, probably without even knowing it. For example, if you've ever purchased anything from IKEA, the nicely cut patterns out of boards that they have are, I assure you, cut on a CNC router. It makes repeatable, accurate cuts quickly to whatever shape you can imagine in a 2 or 3D plane. It takes a skilled operator, a program, and a little bit of knowledge on how to keep this machine going, and you want it going all day long as a shop operator, as that's how you make revenue. These are the industrial versions. There's also consumer versions, which you'll find in maker spaces, tech schools, junior highs, colleges, and a lot of people's basements. And you can make picture frames or tools or a lot of hobby crafts that go on to make small business sales. These make a boatload of dust as well. There's 2 segments that I feel we could benefit. Whatever segment you have, here's a typical CNC dust router shoe. It's basically a broom bristle that covers the cutting bit. You can see the cutting bit on the left and sticking through on the bottom right. And with this exposure, chips, which are either big chips or microscopic dust, will go right through this. And imagine the analogy of you see a forest from a mile away, and it looks like a wall. You and I both know we can walk through a forest, a pine tree forest, with ease. You get to go right past those trees. And that's kind of what dust is through these, they call them skirts. It goes right through these bristles. And even a properly sized skirt for a bit that's adequately set up will still kick dust onto unintended areas. So here was a really nice setup with a pretty good dust shoe. And you can see that chips were getting right onto their keyboard. I assure you this isn't beneficial. So we've created a self-adjusting dust collection system that does a lot of jobs at once, but it's pretty simple. We connect the hose to a motor of the spindle. We have a flexible tube that's connected to a weighted base that sort of floats and adjusts to whatever height is needed for whatever cutting situation. There's a little bit more science behind it, but it's pretty much that simple. So when I mentioned all the jobs this system does, the trickery was coming up with a system that did all of these at once, as several competitors out there do some of these, but not all. And that's the value we bring. So we accommodate various tool lengths, and a tool is sticking out here, various tool material heights, depths of cut, and a big one is it retracts for tool changes automatically. So you don't have to babysit this or have the program wait for you to come push a button or physically maneuver this. Big thing is it physically blocks dust particles, which are coming flying off of this thing, and it hits this and goes right into the accelerated path into the dust collection system. And the beauty is it does this with no manual intervention. You set it and forget it, and that's what we love about it. But it's not just the operators that get excited. They're going to go home a lot cleaner, and they'll be excited about that. The foreman in the shop will have more throughput for the same or better cost. And the CEOs will be really excited, or presidents, because they just improve safety in the shop, not only for their clients to walk through and see a clean shop, but reducing health hazard, fire risks, and operator dangers. And the customers will like this too, because they'll get more throughput from their suppliers, faster parts, and better surface finishes, and more accurate cuts as well. To walk you through the reason why I believe this can be monetized, for a couple of points. The first is shops want a return on their investment of any capital expense in 3 years or less. The other thing is we found in our customer discovery, 85% of operators spend about 30 minutes a shift cleaning dust. These are skilled laborers. And if their rate is $30 an hour and you lose $20 an hour every hour your machine's not running, I'll walk you through the financials behind this. So 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, we'll say 50 weeks a year. Shops are spending about $6,000 a year to collect dust. So the reason I feel this can be monetized is the cost that it will take to produce and sell this with decent margins. First option, I think, we'd roll out a $1,000 version, which can easily be made, designed and stocked, shop installs. maybe a custom or modified system needs to be made for a specific shop. So we'd bump it up to $2,500 for some small amount of work, and possibly a $6,000 option for a custom. And I do realize I'm out of time, and that's my fault for going over. So I look forward to any questions and comments we have from Scott and Dana or other panelists.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kyle. You know, had Jefferson had a better router, I mean, just think how much quicker Monticello could have been built. I mean, this is good stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to say a little more now about our panelists as they come on the screen. And Kyle, stick there because, you know, there might be some back and forth and some questions. Scott Button is with us. He is a managing director at Venture Investors, which is Wisconsin's oldest and largest venture capital firm. They focus a lot on health tech, as does Scott in particular. He's on the board of, I think, 5 different emerging companies in that space right now. He's very active in entrepreneurial activities around Madison and well beyond. So welcome, Scott. John Lewis is with us. John is the executive VP for strategy and development at Direct Supply. And what that means at the end of the day is John sees a lot of ideas and young companies and all of that come over his radar screen. I think probably you and your teams have looked at about 2,000 such innovations over time. And so, which makes great sense with Direct Supply as it grows and as it innovates internally as well. So thank you, John, for joining us. And Dana Guthrie. Dana is now running Gateway Capital, which is Capital Partners, which is part of the Badger Fund to Funds network. Recently closed on a round of about 6.2 million. I think you might even raise more unless you're oversubscribed. And she's got a degree in computer engineering and energy engineering, and she was at Johnson Controls for a bit, and so that was maybe a long bit. And so it's so great to see her today too. And she also founded Alchemy Angels, which is still part of the mix. So with that, thoughts for Kyle and the dust collecting apparatus around routers.
Hey, Kyle. Dana here. Thank you so much for that. That was actually a pretty cool presentation.
All right.
I did have a question around, it's more around serviceability. So I'm assuming you guys are collecting this dust and storing it somewhere. Can you walk us through the act of, disposing of that dust somehow? How frequently does it have to happen? And does the operation of the machine have to stop more frequently to handle that?
Yeah, I will show you a picture of the dust collection system. So imagine a giant shop vac, and you see this slide. So the dust goes into a hose and it goes into this type of machine, which is typically either adjacent to the machine or next to it, or maybe in another room if it's really loud. And it goes into these bins. And if it's pure sawdust, horse farmers really like it. There are companies that dispose of sawdust. I was thinking one of the avenues for monetization was to sell this, but that's not something, that's not when you play follow the money, that's not something that we could do. So you'd be collecting more dust. But to answer your question, you can exchange these bins in a matter of minutes, and it doesn't really affect the operation because you can time it such that as an operator is setting up the next board, that this is being removed or taken away. I hope that answers.
Hey, Kyle, this is John Lewis. When this gets taken to market, are you displacing? You're displacing, the shoe sort of version. Does it also require the taking out those existing, like you said, the dust collectors or any other parts? Like, I tend to be interested in what those switching costs are for the people, the market that you're going after, and sort of how hard it is to actually make somebody make that conversion.
It's really simple. It'd be removing this with a Allen wrench here. The hose comes off here, and it's a quick disconnect with just a worm gear. And then you'd be installing something like this right in its place. You connect that same hose right there, and you design it for the 4-inch hose or the 6-inch hose that whatever the shop has. So it should be a matter of minutes.
Kyle, it's really cool technology you have there. And frankly, I think I could have used it in my father's wood workshop. I remember we'd always traipse sawdust back in the house, and my mom would be screaming at us, particularly with the router. I'm curious, have you had any interactions with commercial partners and tested this in manufacturing environments to look at both the productivity side? And I would think just the health and safety of all the particle board that's used today and all that fine dust and the glues and elements that people are breathing in, and looking at air particulate or anything like that. I mean, just kind of what real world evidence do you have today around what you have?
I don't have any traction yet, and I say that because I am heavily involved in another startup, and I just haven't moved the needle on this. So part of this pitch is to hopefully seek out collaborators who are willing to take this and run with it, or better yet, get a licensing agreement. So I don't have any evidence outside of my personal shop and our use, and the three of us who use this on a weekly basis. If and when this thing ever broke, we would stop routing to fix our dust collection system, be it a bolt or screw or whatever part broke as we were in our tinkering phase, because we knew whatever time we put into making it work, we would get it back within days. Not only that, I wouldn't have to scrub the machines or the floor or clean the whole shop because of this. So long answer short, we don't have any data, and that's what I'm here pitching for, hoping that this sparks some interest in somebody that can take this and move the needle.
Yeah, no, I mean, find a young business school student looking when they graduate to team up with and have them go out and hustle and find some pilot partners. And I think talking to the OEMs, I think it's really interesting. Of course, I don't understand the barriers to entry, but cool technology.
Thank you.
Okay. Others quickly before we get to our next presentation. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that in a sense it seems so simple, yet it's the potential for productivity increases in this is so strong. So
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, Kyle. Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely.
Nice job.
Next up, Amit Joshi and Joseph Kirchner, they're partnered through Marquette and MCW in this case, and it's novel non-invasive therapies for treating ear infections. So pleased to have you, and Amit and Joe, take away.
All right. Thank you for having us, and thank you for Kevin Box for inviting us to present at this forum. This is a new technology resulting from a collaboration between my lab in the Department of Biomedical Engineering and Dr. Kirchner's lab in otolaryngology. So what we are proposing to do is address a problem which almost all of us face with, either as children or for those of us who are parents. We certainly have been to multiple pediatrician visits for ear infections. And ear infections or otitis media, they're the leading cause of visiting pediatrician. Now, for most people, these are minor inconveniences, but this can result in serious illnesses. Is a leading cause of hearing loss in children. It can lead to educational, speech, and multiple other developmental disabilities. For chronic disease, you sometimes have to do surgical placement of tympanic membrane tubes. Overall, this costs roughly $5 billion in US healthcare. So how do we treat them? Right now, the treatments are primarily with systemic orally delivered antibiotics. So usually you have a 1 to 2 week course of antibiotics. These antibiotics are not pleasant in children. They often have serious GI system side effects. More seriously, they often contribute to antibiotic resistance in children. Further, compliance is very hard. If you have a toddler, you could imagine how hard it is to make a 2-year-old take these antibiotics straight away for 10 days. But the most important concern with these current methods is that they often do not deliver the antibiotic where it's supposed to be. You are supposed to deliver the antibiotic to the middle ear. And it has been published that in often 1/3 to 35% of patients, there is absolutely no delivery of amoxicillin to the middle ear fluid. So that's the problem which we are trying to address. So this is the status quo right now, that we want to deliver the antibiotic to middle ear, but we are giving it orally, and then we are hoping for it to reach there, which in 1/3 or more of patients, it doesn't reach there. So what we want to go is are there ways to locally deliver can we locally deliver antibiotics directly to the middle ear cavity where infection is occurring? Now, the challenge there is this membrane, which we call tympanic membrane or eardrum in the colloquial language. Now, eardrum is designed by nature to be a pretty strong watertight barrier. It's composed of 4 layers of cells. These cells are joined by something called tight junctions, and they really stop the diffusion of water and their solutes. So simply applying antibiotics to the outer ear is not going to work. So if you apply it, it's going to stay there. It will not cross eardrum efficiently. So we need a vehicle somehow to cross the tympanic membrane without surgically opening a hole in it. And what we hit upon almost serendipitously as an answer to this problem was nanoparticles. So nanoparticles have seen a lot of work over past 2 decades, primarily as vehicles for delivering cancer-related therapies. And we found out that if you design nanoparticles with a certain size and a certain charge, then they can actually cross tympanic membranes. So one of the nanoparticle vehicles we are working with is called a liposome. A liposome is created by a bilayer lipid membrane. So these are bilayer lipids, and they enclose an aqueous region. So essentially, there are 2 compartments in a liposome. There is a hydrophobic or a water-hating compartment where you can put things like steroids or dexamethasone, and then there's a water-soluble compartment where you can put antibiotics. So these systems can be designed at a certain size with a certain charge. You can either pack an antibiotic, you can either pack a steroid, or you can even pack a multi-drug carrier with a steroid and antibiotic together in one single vehicle. This is an electron micrograph of the liposomes, which we have made in our lab for this purpose. These are roughly 100 to 150 nanometers in size. They can be designed to have a very good monodispersity index. And again, you can pack multiple kind of drugs in these systems. And these are our pilot results. So what we have shown is that we took a common antibiotic, first a ciprofloxacin, and if we take eardrum from chinchilla. Now, chinchilla is an animal with a middle ear anatomy very similar to human. It's known as an established model for studying therapies for otitis media. And if you take a chinchilla and you take out the ear canal, and the entire middle ear with external ear canal, and you can apply these drugs directly in the ear canal, and then you can sample from the middle ear that how much drug are you actually delivering. So for ciprofloxacin, this black line over here is that if you apply the free antibiotic, and then this red line here is that if you apply the same concentration of antibiotic, the same dose, but now complex in a cationic liposome. And as you can see that within 15 minutes of application, you can exceed the therapeutic dose for ciprofloxacin, which is around 1 microgram per ml concentration, just by applying it to an external ear canal. If you take a different system, if you take these liposomes and now pack a steroid, which is often used for chronic ear infection patients where multiple inflammatory processes are going on, you get the same results. Within about 30 minutes, you can deliver substantially more steroid compared to applying the free drug in the external ear canal. And we have also developed another formulation, which is a sustained release formulation based on PLG and nanoparticles. And this time we tried with a new generation antibiotic, ceftriaxone. And with ceftriaxone, there's a very poor penetration if you apply the drug on its own. But if you package the drug in a cationic nanoparticle, then within 10 to 20 minutes, you start delivering the drug, and you have sustained release going on over 2 hours to weeks of periods using these sort of sustained release formulations. So what we have is that we have these nanoparticle configurations, multiple configurations, which can quickly and efficiently transport these drugs. The key advantage of this technology is that these are not new nanomaterials. These are materials which have been tested. They are similar to materials used for chemotherapy delivery. They are in human. And we are seeking licensees for this technology and also potential collaborators for scaling up our methods. And please feel free to contact Kevin or any of us for more information on this area. I will thank my lab members, Gayatri Sharma and Abdul Parchura, postdocs in my lab, who worked very closely with Kirshner lab people, Wenju Hong and Paujie Kampang to do these experiments. NIH has supported our work with our R21 grant, which is ongoing, and Medical College of Wisconsin has also supported this work. Thank you very much. I'm ready for questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Joshi, and also to Dr. Kirshner, who, by the way, is also Dean of the medical school at UW or at the MCW. So thank you so much. This is really interesting in so many different ways, not only in terms of the potential to alleviate suffering with of patients who can feel this, but a rising problem around antibiotic resistance. I mean, there are people who think over the next, coming decades, this is going to be a bigger and bigger problem around the world. So observations, I'm going to start with Scott Button on this. What do you see? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's a big problem. I feel like every presentation is solving a family problem. Both of our children had tubes put in, and as a parent, seeing your young child go under anesthesia is so scary. So this is really exciting. I know you touched a little bit on the regulatory pathway without getting into great detail. Can you talk a little more about the pathway and a sense of timeline or maybe dollars to achieve that? And if some of those details you don't know, that's fine as well.
Yeah, so we are at a very early stage in terms of pathway. The first step which we are doing is that we want to see their immediate toxicity locally in the middle ear. That's usually one of the first barriers. We want to see that these nanoparticles, once cross into middle ear, are not toxic to the inner ear. A second barrier will be the systemic toxicity, that we have to quantify what their biodistribution and clearance profile is. On that, I'm more hopeful, because in terms of liposome, there's a lot of literature on how they clear and what their lifetime is. In terms of money, usually the process we think in academic size is going SBIR route, where your phase 1 studies, the immediate toxicity can be done in animal models for $150,000 to $200,000, going on to phase 2 studies, which will be in a couple of $1 million. And from that point onward, you certainly need an external investor or an industry partner to take them forward.
Great, thank you.
One thing, Scott, this is Joe. I would just tell you that, as it relates to the nanoparticles, I don't have a lot of concerns. I've done a lot of research in ear toxicity, and so the medications that we're using have been well studied in the middle ear space, and so it's unlikely that there will be toxicity issues, as Dr. Joshi mentions. We have to obviously show that, and we expect to have that work done within the next 6 months or so. But it's likely that this is very safe and will be very well tolerated. The piece that is perhaps less clear is sort of the efficacy of it. And so, we'll have to demonstrate efficacy first in animal models, and we're well prepared to do that. And then obviously, if we're able to do that, then getting to the clinical trials will be important. But we've been surprised at how readily the nanoparticles have traversed the tympanic membrane, actually at a rate that's much higher than we initially thought. And so with that, because you're putting the antibiotics directly into the middle ear space, they're just highly effective. And as an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, what I will tell you is that the primary way in which we treat kids with ear infections who have the tubes like your children had, we use topical antibiotics now, and that's known to be enormously effective, and the organisms don't develop resistance when you treat in that fashion. The problem is that you got to have a tube in the ear. And so obviously we want to avoid the surgery and want to avoid having to do that. And if we're successful, this will change the absolute paradigm of the way ear infections are thought of, not only in this country, but around the world. So you might imagine that although we have access to lots of surgical therapies here in the US, otitis media is a worldwide problem, and particularly in some developing countries where having access to surgeons and operating suites and those kinds of things just is not possible. This has the potential from a global health perspective to really change the way in which we think of ear disease, and is probably a multi-billion dollar solution.
Let me quickly get to some questions in the chat that are, I think, very pertinent.
I had a couple of follow-ups, Tom.
What's that?
Oh, never mind. I'll take it offline. This is interesting. I'd love to learn more. I had a couple of follow-ups.
Oh, okay. I know we're just getting a little short on time. How do your nanoparticles compare to nanohydrogels?
Yeah, so nanohydrogels is a different technology. There are other groups using them. Typically, nanohydrogels are applied as a layer. So, another approach is that you apply a gel layer on the tympanic membrane, and then you do a sustained release of the drug. The nanohydrogels do not themselves cross the tympanic membrane. What we are proposing is that the nanoparticles actually cross the membrane and deliver the drug, and you do not have a residue or a gum-like thing sticking on your eardrum. So that way it is slightly different from the hydrogel approach.
Okay. And then quickly, I'm curious, this is a question about the refrigeration requirements for transport to purchasers as well as post-delivery storage. Also, it can be applied in a home setting.
Yeah. So the particles which we have made, they are stable at room temperature. We do not have to refrigerate them for stability. They are fine from 4 degrees to 25 degrees. So you just use regular refrigeration. They can be lyophilized, so you can create powder formulations for long-term storage and distribution.
Okay.
Can you, just a quick yes or no on the animal models, are they good enough or robust enough that you can get a sense of efficacy and enough drug delivery in an animal model, or do you have to really get to humans for that?
You have certain challenges, but certainly you can get a very good idea of preliminary efficacy in a chinchilla model. The human thing can be really answered in a human trial.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. Well, there'll be time for more questions, hopefully at the end. So if you have questions, if you're watching or our panelists too, we can go back and discuss kind of overall what they saw. So next up, Shangping Xu, Ying Wang, who are going to talk about novel ceramic filters for the production of safe drinking water. They're both at the UW Milwaukee. So welcome. Let's see, perhaps they're getting their audio on.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Well, it's a great honor to be here. Thank you for your time. Today, my name is Shangping. I'm from UWM. Today, I want to introduce novel ceramic filters for water treatment that my colleague, Dr. Ying Wang, and I have developed. Firstly, I want to talk about the issue that we want to deal with. Now we have the world population is 7.8 billion, and according to the United Nations, 2.1 billion people do not have the access to safe drinking water. And the issues that we face are obviously different depending on the population you look at, the location, but there are a group of pollutants that are hard to remove. Firstly, I want to talk about the technique that we develop, how we tackle these hard to remove pollutants. The first one that I want to talk about is arsenic. Arsenic, you can see from these maps, the drinking water standard for arsenic is 10 microgram per liter or 10 ppb. And according to this estimate, there are more than 140 million people in 50 countries that they are drinking contaminated water, including in the US. So arsenic, I will show you a little bit of chemistry. It's pretty hard to remove, but our filter is very effective in terms of the arsenic removal. The second target pollutant is bacteria. Bacteria pollution, sometimes you think about the developing world, but actually it's a local issue. It's an issue across this country. So here I'm showing a map of Wisconsin with all these hotspots with the percentage of private wells that are contaminated by microbial contaminants. In Wisconsin, about 60% of people use private wells. Here, you look at the map, you have this kind of percentage of wells that are polluted by bacteria, and you can see it's a large number of wells that are having this contamination. And in Wisconsin, actually, if you do have a private well at home, and if you want to sell the house, actually, if you invoke the well inspection contingency, a few contaminants that will be detected automatically. One is E. coli, which is a representative of microbial contamination. The other one is arsenic. The third one is nitrate. All of them are hard to remove. Here's another photo that one of my students, when he traveled to Dominican Republic, took in 2014. Here you can easily see how people get their drinking water and all the contaminants that they have to deal with. Microbial and virus contamination is the primary concern. They have some chemical contaminants. And I want to mention that when we toured this place, even if you look at the water that they use in the hospitals, they are contaminated by E. coli. It's quite kind of sad to see that, but it's a big issue for the local people there. So the overall, the market, it's pretty big. According to this consulting company, the point of use water treatment systems in the US was 6.8 billion in 2016, and the world market was double this size. So I want to talk about our technology. So here is the materials primarily used for the production of these ceramic filters. We use red art clay and some recycled fibers, like the some commercial name is called green fiber, but it's basically recycled paper. And there are some other ingredients, but relatively speaking minor. So these are the two major ingredients for our patent pending ceramic filtration materials. Some of the advantages of these technologies, they are low cost. Based on our estimates, it can be below $1 for each filter. It's easy to make, and it's easy to use and maintain. As you can see from the Dominican Republic example, a lot of times when we apply these technologies in the developing world especially, you want to make sure that they are really easy to be deployed, because otherwise you can have a very complicated system, say, right, you will require a very stable supply of electricity, and sometimes that's just not impossible. And you want to be versatile so you can meet different needs and effective. So one challenge for the water filtration techniques is to find a balance between the removal efficiency and the flow rate. Here I'm showing a ceramic filter that we made in our labs. It's relatively easy to make a filter that has high removal efficiency, but with low flow. Or if you can make some filters that are high flow rates, but relatively. So I think we look at developments for the new technologies. We try to push this combination in the, this kind of good combination of both requirements for the techniques. So for our filter, we are here and here, depending on the target of the contaminants. We can design it across this area, so we can. But in summary, if you want to have comparable removal efficiency, we can achieve much higher flow rates. Or if you want to maintain the same flow rates, we can achieve higher efficiency. And the target contaminants here include arsenic that I mentioned, bacteria, and the virus. So here I want to talk a little bit about the arsenic. Arsenic is really hard to remove. It's still a worldwide challenge. For the arsenic 5 here, you can see it has negative charges. For the arsenic 3, you can see it's even more challenging because it does not have any charge. So from our testing, we started with arsenic 120 microgram per liter. The drinking water standard is 10 microgram per liter. So we can remove more than 90% of the arsenic and bring it below the drinking water standard. And when we do that with a typical filter, for the arsenic 3, it's a little hard to remove. We can produce, each filter can produce about 9,300 liters of water, which is enough to supply a typical household for about half a year. And for arsenic 5, we can produce about 42,000 liters of water for each filter, which is enough to meet the demand for a typical household for 2.5 years. They are long-lasting. They have, as you can see, has very low maintenance requirement. They're easy to use. And then for the bacterial removal, we can easily achieve a 2 log. 2 log here means 99%, or 3 log means 99.9%, and so on. And 5 logs of bacteria removal. For virus, we can easily achieve 2 logs of removal. And again, each filter can produce on the order of 10,000 or more liters of water. So here I want to also show you the cost requirements. Again, based on our estimation, each filter probably would need less than $1 to produce. And if you look at the water supply situation in the developing world, especially, the low cost is a must. This is a Bangladesh, a photo from Bangladesh, and almost more than half of the population in Bangladesh, they suffer from arsenic pollution in their drinking water, and it's really important for this kind of application to be low cost and easy to maintain. And our technique is also versatile. Here you can see we showed you the disk format of this filter, but we have made granular filters. We have made pots, and we have, we can also make this kind of columns. Depending on the need, this technique can be very versatile. Now I want to talk about the potential market based on the applications. I talked about the technical side of it, but here is the arsenic pollution in Wisconsin groundwater. It's a growing issue, especially if you look at the 60% population who are using the private wells as a drinking water source. But
we're going to wrap up on this. Can you summarize the final thoughts?
Oh, sure. So this is the well water. This is outdoor activity. You can use this filter to produce safe drinking water from streams. This is if you have a natural disaster. This is example in Haiti. You can, obviously the infrastructure will be lost during these kind of events, and we can use these filters to produce safe drinking water. And this is for the military to make mobile water treatment systems. So the next step is we want to test these filters in the field. Again, we have some connections in Dominican Republic. In the past, we have tested filters there. But we look at the possibility of testing these techniques in the field. I want to compare our filters against the existing techniques on the market. We're looking forward to possibilities of having partners to scale up the production. With that, I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Professor Xu. Let's turn to our panelists right away, and some great, I think, expertise overall with our responders here. So let's see. I might start with this with Dana. Hi, Dana.
Hey there, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, I thought this was really interesting. It's obviously a big global problem, which you like to hear. And this question is just pure ignorance from my standpoint. But you mentioned several specific types of contaminants. Are there other common contaminants that you find that you either this filter would be less effective on, or that you haven't quite had the time to test to understand the how effective it could be?
Right, that's a good question. Thank you. There are contaminants that are relatively easy to be removed, like heavy metals. Because they have positive charges, and there are a lot of filtration materials that can remove these positively charged contaminants. Arsenic is really one of the most challenging ones. And along that line, we have selenites that are also hard to remove. We believe our filters can remove them. We have done some initial testing, but we haven't been able to do large-scale testing. We have done some very detailed testing against arsenic, both arsenic 5 and arsenic 3. Now, obviously, bacteria and virus, they're also common, but hard to remove contaminants. So we focus on these 3. Because there are some existing techniques that can handle some other contaminants pretty well.
Okay. We have time for one more question. John, do you?
Yeah. So there are other sort of ceramic filtering has been around for a long time.
Yes.
And so I'm just trying to understand sort of what is the differentiation between your products and why it is a sort of, I don't want to get too deep into the science, but I'm interested in sort of what makes it different than those existing products. Because again, you're going to be sort of displacing others, or you're going to go into a market where you're going to license to put it into existing form factors that are out there in the market. And so what makes it different? Is it that combination of the clay and the recycled plastics that give it some different porous sort of qualities?
Yeah, well, the fiber that we use definitely is unique, and
Yeah.
it provides the good combination of flow rates and the removal efficiency. There are some other materials that are commonly used, so like a sawdust. Kyle mentioned that one, but sawdust actually is very commonly used. Rice husk, the flour, like a wheat flour, corn flour, they have been commonly used, especially in the developing world. But the challenge is, if you look at rice husks, the flow rate can be very high, but the efficiency is very low. If you look at the flour, the efficiency can be very high, but the flow rates are very low. So the existing ones, when we compare it to ours, I think if you look at the combination of efficiency and flow rates, we are confident that they are really one of the best ones. Now, also there's some minor ingredients that are okay to achieve this kind of removal efficiency, but they are low cost. They're not mentioned here, but they can be found in our patent filing. But they are also critical for the efficiency.
Thank you very much, Professor Xu. I know we're going to have to move on now. There's probably another question on chat that perhaps you could handle independently here. So very good. Well, next up, we're going to hear from Nicole Lohr and Michael Salinger, both of whom were at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And this is about light therapy, a light therapy device for the prevention of hyperfusion injury in heart disease. So back to the medical world. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm very excited. This proposal is in its infancy as far as tech development, but the science behind it has actually been bore out in my lab for probably the last 10, 12 years. So why do we want to use light therapy? Well, Dr. Salinger and myself were cardiologists, and so if we're treating coronary artery disease, then we're basically picking up the #1 killer of Americans, which makes this type of technology at its underpinning incredibly vital. So if you think about it, someone dies in the United States every 36 seconds from coronary artery disease. So while Mike and myself may look at it easy, okay, we'll put a stent in somebody, they'll walk out of the hospital, everything's fine. People still die from this disease. And so roughly 2,400 individuals will never see their families again after they've experienced a heart attack. To put it in a larger marketing perspective, we perform in this country a little over 1 million cardiac catheterizations, which is the main technique in treating coronary artery disease. So this is not a problem that really isn't going away, and that's unfortunate. So really, what is the clinical course of coronary artery disease? Well, the heart receives its blood supply from coronary arteries. And what's interesting about the heart is that it's already at baseline, taking most of the oxygen out of the blood to begin with. And so if it needs oxygen, it needs to increase blood flow. But we have these coronary vessels that can accumulate atherosclerotic or plaque. So those cholesterol plaques that your doctors are always harping on you about. And over time, what you can see is a gradual pinching of the vessel and obstructing blood flow. And so over time, the heart muscle just gets less oxygen and puts it at risk of having permanent damage. If people have heart attacks that they don't recognize, what ends up happening is that muscle dies. And that's what you see here. And that's what we describe as a heart attack. So the time is muscle, so to speak, is incredibly vital, because as soon as this blood flow is obstructed, this heart muscle immediately starts to die. So for those of us that see the patients that are lucky enough to present early, what we do is we put a balloon catheter into the vessel, kind of break up some of this plaque, and then put a mesh stent. However, this fixes the obvious problem. The blood vessel looks great, but this downstream problem that isn't seen very well is that what you end up having is reperfusion injury. So this muscle has been failing to get any blood flow, so it's not getting oxygen. And now all of a sudden it gets a lot of oxygen, and that can damage the heart muscle further. So even though we're treating the problem at the surface, there's an underlying heart injury that still occurs. And one of the ways we can think about protecting heart muscle is by using a very common and what I would call endogenous or existing within our own tissues molecule called nitric oxide. And my research has been focused on showing that if you expose blood or blood vessels or tissue to red light, some of the commercials love showing the benefits of red light, but I've been able to show that this increases nitric oxide. And if we can get nitric oxide to tissue, we can not only improve blood flow in the small vessels that we can't treat with stents, but also prevent that muscle from having that reperfusion injury. So what the technology we're proposing is at the time of cardiac catheterization, what we would like to do is, treat the conventional way with a balloon catheter and open up the obstruction, but also during this procedure have a fiber optic catheter that's directly in this bloodstream and then shining light while we're reperfusing. What that allows us to do is have the light act on the blood cells that are flowing through and release nitric oxide. So essentially, it's a really elegant way of delivering the hormones and molecules like nitric oxide in exactly the spot where we need it the most. Why do we know that this has potential to work? Well, I've done a fair number of reperfusion infarct studies in rabbits, and that's the data that I'm going to show you here. We can focus on right over here. So if I perform just a standard, like occlude a blood vessel in a rabbit, I can expect about 40 to 50% of the heart muscle in that area to die. If I use 60 milliwatts of red light, really only for a few minutes upon reperfusion, when I'm opening up that vessel, I can cut that damage by half, as you can see. What's interesting is, and on this figure, nitrite is actually the active ingredient of beet juice. It actually has a synergistic effect. So we can even change the amount of light energy if it's in the presence of nitrite, which is a fairly benign, molecule that you can ingest. Why do we know NO is related? Because if we give an NO blocker, the nitric oxide is blocked and we don't see the benefit of light to reduce infarct size. So really, blood vessels obviously are in every single major organ. And so the applicability of this type of catheter and light can be applied to cerebral infarcts, which is strokes, or even potentially traumatic brain injury. It can also find use in the transplant world, where we look at, organs that we're transplanting. They also are really, at risk of reperfusion injury. And then finally, in an area that I've been studying also, is that you can see in patients who have peripheral vascular disease, where they have chronic wounds that can't be healed because their lower extremity blood vessels are blocked. We've been able to see improvements in wound healing with red light therapy. So there's more potential than just coronary disease, but then again, we felt like this would be a great place to start. So what I'm asking of you is, I appreciate any feedback that you have, but as we start trying to develop and produce this catheter, we're looking for collaborators, potential other sources of funding. The work that I showed you was funded through the NIH and the VA. So I've been able to secure federal grants looking at the basic mechanisms. But now we're at the point of moving this into the technology so that we can actually help the patients that we see every day. And so with that, I will.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. Fascinating. I'm going to start with Scott Button here. Reperfusion, you have probably encountered this in some of the companies that you've worked with, or you've seen other presentations surrounding this, maybe for some of the other pieces that you've worked on. But what are your thoughts as you look at this?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting, and I'd offer up offline. One of my colleagues that recently joined our firm has a PhD in heart failure, and I think could be a nice resource for you. So I'd be happy to make that connection because he's
Thank you.
well more versed in the topic than myself. It's very elegant, very simple solution. When frankly, our firm spending more time in the cardiac space. I guess one of the basic questions I would have is, how strong is the intellectual property, given that you're basically hitting the blood supply with a certain frequency of light source, and how protectable is that?
So that question does come up because, as you know, and I alluded to, these red light devices are everywhere. Interestingly enough, it's never been combined with an interventional catheter, which is why for many years I didn't seek out Kevin's input, and the MCW Office of Tech Transfer. They felt that it was worthwhile pursuing for a patent. So I think I'm not. Again, I'm just kind of like the scientist, so I don't know that question. And if Mike Salinger, who I saw was on, or Kevin Boggs wants to jump in, I would really appreciate somebody bailing me out on that question.
That's not a fair question. We can take it offline too. I guess the other sense, and this might not be a fair one either, but given the nature of the treatment, do you have a sense of the regulatory pathway? I mean, could it be a 510K? Approach? Or
so what's interesting is that most of the lights that are marketed are under 510K. I would think that this would actually have to go through IDE and not the 510 because again, this is an invasive. It's invasive. There's I think inherent risks of just doing something like this. What we're starting with is now looking at doing the standard FDA model with a pig, performing a coronary intervention and light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Mike Salinger. I think we're looking at established catheters first that are used with other wavelengths to perhaps shorten the regulatory time. And of course, Nicole was alluding to the fact that nitric oxide is a very short half-life molecule, usually existing as a gas. So it's very unique that we can produce this on the spot rather than trying to produce it, transfer it, and administer it. And I think those are the unique aspects of the concept.
And I didn't show this slide, but there's multiple ways the body produces nitric oxide. And the way that we're proposing is actually predicated on the greatest potential source that the light could act on is under conditions of low pH and low oxygen tension, which is exactly what ischemia is. And so that's where we see that this really has the potential to synergize at reperfusion.
Great. Well, I'll save any other questions. And Tom, we're Jessica,
Sure.
Maybe you can connect us afterward, and happy to provide some thoughts and further advice if it's helpful.
Thanks.
Yeah, Nicole, Scott and his partners are indeed great resources around this. So I hope you do take that up. John or Dana, any quick comments or thoughts? Otherwise, I was going to go to the chat here. There's a question: is the TX benefit versus untreated tissue durable past 6 months? That's part one. And is there a biomarker that can serve as a proxy for improved mortality, or will you need large prospective clinical trials?
So I think, yeah, I mean, I think that infarct size is determined I mean, we're doing these in animals. So if you don't see infarct, then it's less, I don't go out 6 months, you'll see that rather quickly. As with respect to biomarkers, what we have seen is that we've been able to actually measure NO levels in the plasma of human subjects where we have not used this catheter but have shined light. So I think those plasma NO levels would be great biomarkers. The biomarker game with clinical trials is always, it can always be fraught with a lot of, trying to pick the right biomarker. I think in this case, I would use, you could consider like in a clinical trial, early phase with PET to look at, really perfusion. And then secondly, I would say that I would look at quality of life and I would look at echocardiograms.
Okay. Well, very good. Thank you, Dr. Lohr. And, despite the times we're in, it's a great reminder that heart disease is still right there at the top in terms of being a killer and all that. So thank you so much. All right, next up, 2 presentations left. We'll hear from Xingkang Wang and Junhong Chen, who are both affiliated with the University of Chicago, but also some partnerships here. And this is about a water filtration system for heavy metal ions with zero wastewater. So welcome and take it away.
Thank you, Tom. Let me share my screen.
And by the way, this is an invention that has its roots in the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee.
Thank you. It's my great honor to introduce our water filtration system today. We did this technology when we are in Milwaukee, which is moved to University of Chicago last year. So as everyone knows, lead can cause serious problem for our health, especially for pregnant women and young children. So water quality from water utilities typically is good, but not always at a household. So why? The reason is the old pipe underground, they contain the lead. And during the night, especially overnight, not many people use the water. So the water sitting there overnight for a long time, the lead got more chance to reach out. So in the earlier morning, we can see typically a higher lead concentration. As you can see here, Milwaukee Water Works did a great job to analysis of water quality every year. They identified the lead concentration at early morning is about 6.2 parts per billion, which is lower than the action level recommended by EPA. But I have to say, there's no safety limit for lead. Lead is always poisonous. And then also identified the highest level was 130 parts per billion, which is much higher than the recommended the action level. So there's some water filtration system available in the market now. The first one I want to mention is the reverse osmosis system. They can generate almost pure water. They remove heavy metal ions. The thing is, when they remove that heavy metal ions, they also remove health ions, such as calcium and magnesium, which are essential to our body. The other thing I want to mention for our system is they waste too much water. When we get 2 gallons of water, we have to dump 8 gallons of water, like a full like a bathtub. The other issues for this system is it's difficult to replace filter. So the other system is we call that the anti-sink system. It's very popular. We can find a 3-stage or 1-stage by choice. Typically it works well. One issue is after we use that a couple months, we feel the water come out slowly. So we have to replace that. Otherwise, you have to be very patient to get a cup of water. So typically we change that at 6 or 9 months. And here is what it looks and the sink. It takes me like about 10 minutes to replace that every time. The other system I want to mention is the faucet system. They mount on the faucet. The cost is low, but we have to change the filter in this system every 2 to 3 months. So we have a new solution for this drinking water. We call that the zero wastewater CDI. So what is CDI? CDI is called capacitive deionization. The benefit for the CDI is we can selectively remove lead ions and leave health ions such as calcium and magnesium in the water. We don't have to remove them because they are health to our body, and we don't have any wastewater. This device just costs $50 to $100. How this work? So we apply the 1.2 watts to the device. The cation will be absorbed to the negative side, and the anion will be absorbed to the positive side. So we can get a purified water. When we discharge by applying reverse voltage, the concentrated cation anion will come out together because lead and phosphate we are forming bigger particles. Then we can use a filter to remove them easily. So just want to mention, we just target to remove lead ions. We don't need to remove anything else. So we don't need to discharge wastewater. For conventional CDI, they will have to discharge wastewater about 25%. Also want to mention, we modified the electrode specifically to targeting lead ions. About the market, I want to mention, I think everyone knows the Flint water crisis in 2013. After that, US Today Network did a great job about investigation that identified about 2,000 water systems have excessive lead concentration all over the 50 states. So why not just change the old pipe underground? Well, possible, but just too costly, and there's a lot of job to do if you see the picture like this. So the best solution for now is just add a water filtration system for the drinking water. According to Hector research, the water and the wastewater treatment market is projected to be $674 billion by 2025. According to research report insights, water treatment is likely to witness a robust expansion and a steady compound annual growth rate of 7.5 by 2027. I just want to mention our technology now is a patent pending that filed in April last year. So as we remove the lead ions with high efficiency, and I want to mention here is specifically want to present you those white particles precipitates. We can see the microsize, so they can easily to remove by filters. So to the end, I want to mention we are looking for collaborator partners, and we try to develop a prototype to test it in real life. If we can have $150,000 to $300,000 for 1 to 2 years, we'll do that, test it in real life. The technology currently is available for licensing and exclusive or non-exclusive terms. That's all I want to say today. Thank you very much.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Huang. So, you know, again, a major global problem, clean water. Everybody has to have it. And fortunately, Milwaukee is the center for some of the solutions around that. So great to have you. I'm going to start here with John Lewis. and then see what Dana has to offer as well. John, what are your thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I guess my first question, it just wasn't clear to me from the presentation. Is this available, or would it be available in a point of use sort of size system? I think, this type of system historically has been sort of probably bigger municipal sort of level, but this is for in-home.
Yes, we're targeting, for now it's a point of use. I think we can expand it. Like the other day, Jessica and us discussed about it. It's possible like for a whole apartment, but we don't know exactly. Well,
Yeah.
It's a more appropriate for now. We say it's very good for a point of use.
And my second question is, and just because it's relevant to the time, is part of the Biden infrastructure bill. Certainly there was potential funding that was included for sort of the elimination of lead, kind of lead lines to home across the country, and putting a big chunk of money towards that. If that actually did happen, does this technology still provide value, or are there other places where lead is going to get into the drinking water of people at home outside of sort of coming through the pipes that are leading from the main lines in the streets to the homes? So it just will it have an alternate use if that sort of thing does get funded? And number two, is that a way for you to think about sort of accessing funds, for some of the development? Like there may be ways to go after some of those infrastructure dollars or some things from a development standpoint, from a government perspective.
Yes. We are looking for that too. Yeah. That's good direction. And yes, we do want some. We were looking for it. Thank you.
Yeah. Everything's infrastructure, right? Under proposals. So, Dana, your thoughts?
Well, John actually took my question. I was going to ask about the infrastructure plan as well. I guess I'll piggyback on his other question. If it's at the point of sale, and maybe you haven't gone this deep into the solution yet, but do you have an idea of target price or around the pricing point that something like this would go for, and how that would compare to the 3 different types of offerings that you laid out on your slide there? The reason that I ask is because my assumption is that some of the communities that are hit the worst by some of these issues probably don't have a lot of filters in their homes today. So how do you kind of address that barrier?
Yes, thank you for the question. I heard about it. There's not much family have filters. They typically, even for me, I thought I trust them. The quality is good. But actually, like a couple of years later, I figured out, oh no, not that they're really good. So as I mentioned, from the water utilities, that's good. But after the long way travel to our home, the lead come out through the pipe, the quality is not that good. So yes, to answer your question, compared to that other types of the filtration system. So for our system, reverse osmosis system, that's typically is expensive than ours, more expensive than ours. So that's about $200 to $500, and the other one is $100 to $200. The third one is about $20 to $40. For our device, for the material, we calculated material test, it's less than $20. So I would say the price for our device is about $50 to $100.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Scott Button, I know you're on the board of visitors for the chemistry department at the UW-Madison. Do you see any potential partners for this team, in that world of chemistry research and beyond?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tom. I was just trying to think of some of the corporates that are involved there. Yeah, 3M is one of the partners there on the advisory board, and certainly I think my understanding is they're a pretty broad player in the filtration area.
Okay.
That would be one that comes to mind for me.
Sure.
Would be 3M.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe there can be some further follow-up here. So thank you, Dr. Wang, for your presentation. Next up, and last but not least, Paige Peters, who's going to talk about rapid radicals technology. And we're back to water. This is one of the Milwaukee sweet spots, right? Advanced wastewater treatment for elimination of sewer overflows and basement backups. So welcome, Paige. Thank you. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Tom. I unfortunately have to wait until the current screen being shared stops being shared so I can share mine.
Oh, yeah. Perhaps Sarah or Jessica,
Sure.
you think they just got it. There you go.
Yeah, go.
There's always someone on it. Awesome. Well, I'm Paige Peters, founder and CEO of Rapid Radicals Technology, and we're developing a rapid wastewater treatment system that is automated, easily integrated, and cost-effective. Our technology protects public and environmental health by rapidly treating raw sewage that would otherwise end up backing up into your basement or released into lakes and rivers when a city's aging infrastructure is overburdened by high-intensity storm events. We've been successful in receiving over $500,000 in collaborative grant awards, including a National Science Foundation Small Business Research Award. If you live in one of the over 800 combined sewer cities in the United States where both stormwater and wastewater are collected in the same pipe, such as Milwaukee, Chicago, and Detroit, you're at risk of having your basement flooded with contaminated water during an intense storm event. And every time one of these events occur, which is happening with more frequency and intensity and with less predictability, utility leaders are forced to decide between overflowing untreated sewage into waterways, such as into Lake Michigan, as shown, or risk backing up residential and commercial basements with contaminated water. Both of these system failures can result in millions of dollars in damage, regulatory fines, or even lawsuits brought upon the utilities. This is in addition to the millions of dollars spent annually on capital improvement projects. Wastewater utilities and their stakeholders deserve a better solution that is certain, reliable, and cost-effective. Rapid Radicals Technology and Marquette University have developed a proprietary solution to treat wastewater in real time, allowing utility leaders to avoid choosing between the need to overflow untreated sewage into the lake and the human health risks associated with basement backups. Where conventional wastewater treatment requires 8 to 14 hours to meet discharge permits, our innovative solution combines high-rate treatment technologies to rapidly remove pollutants and disinfect harmful bacteria and viruses in less than 35 minutes. So what does that really look like? Here's our pilot plant at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District's South Shore Water Reclamation Facility in Oak Creek, the Clean Water Machine. While this unit is currently operational at a wastewater treatment plant, it can also be modified to function as a decentralized end-of-pipe system for remote treatment during storm events or disaster relief efforts. The technology, initially developed at Marquette and funded under the National Science Foundation Water Equipment and Policy Industry University Collaborative Research Center, combines rapid primary treatment for solids and partial nutrient removal with advanced oxidation for soluble organics removal and rapid disinfection of harmful pathogens to meet or exceed Clean Water Act permit requirements in less than 35 minutes. Rapid Radicals will continue to successfully leverage non-dilutive grant opportunities to manufacture pilot scale models that serve to test the technology's efficacy while starting to collect service-based revenue from pilot implementations. And once the technology is ready for full-scale application, other revenue streams will become available, including consulting and royalty-based sub-licensing of IP to equipment manufacturing companies. This provides an on-ramp to their well-established customer channels in the US and globally. We've also conducted nearly 200 customer discovery interviews with stakeholders within the municipal and industrial water treatment sectors, which has solidified market needs to inform our pilot system project goals. Rapid Radicals municipal customers are the over 800 municipalities with combined sewer systems in the United States. Sales of Rapid Radicals' $22 million full-scale system results in a total addressable market of $18.6 billion. Initially, Rapid Radicals will target 4 of the largest combined sewer system municipalities with a scaled implementation and a target market of $88 million. In collaboration with Marquette, we have both a commercialization and a research team. I have 10 years of experience in the environmental engineering industry, working as a consulting engineer for a wastewater utility and as an academic researcher which includes 6 years working on the research, development, and implementation of the rapid radicals treatment system. I have both a BS and MS in civil engineering, and I'm a current PhD student at Marquette. Will, our COO and resident economist, has also studied at Marquette, where he earned a BS Environmental Science and Economics. He also has 3 years experience aggregating and analyzing data as an undergraduate environmental researcher, as well as experience as an economic analyst intern for a small craft brewery here in Milwaukee. Dr. Dan Zittimer is co-inventor of the technology and our lead technical advisor with over 25 years of experience in water and wastewater treatment, including developing important industry partnerships and technology innovation. So we've been quite busy. Our company was founded in 2016, and since then we've participated in National Science Foundation's I-Corps program, the Water Council Brew Accelerator, and Generators G-Beta program. We've been awarded a National Science Foundation Small Business Research Award. We collaborate with Marquette and the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District on scaling the technology to the current pilot that I previously showed. And we submitted recently a Phase 2 award to advance our Phase 1 efforts with National Science Foundation. Those Phase 2 plans include building a mobile pilot unit to expand our partnership with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, as well as engage with the Great Lakes Water Authority in Detroit, who has already committed both funding and site support for our Phase 2 pilot. Currently, we're negotiating our exclusive licensing agreement for the patent pending technology with Marquette, while we work through the unique arrangement with mentor partner companies through that initial funding research center. So while we wait for next steps on our National Science Foundation Phase 2 award, we're so proud to announce that we are among 11 companies from 5 countries selected for the 12th annual Imagine H2O Accelerator cohort, as well as a finalist in the Governor's Business Plan contest. We're also pursuing additional non-dilutive funding opportunities through the Air Force Small Business Innovation Research Program, AFWorks. So here's how you can help us. We're looking for mentors with experience licensing technology or sub-licensing to a manufacturer, and those who can advise on capital acquisition. Additionally, in the event that we do not receive the non-dilutive funding we propose to National Science Foundation, we will be seeking outside investment of $1.5 million to pursue our mobile piloting plans and hire a technician and sales and marketing manager. In the United States, the municipal sector spends $12.5 billion every year on combined sewer system improvements, management, and projects that, in the long run, are ineffective at keeping up with the increasing frequency and severity of wet weather events. Rapid Radicals provides an option that is certain, reliable, and cost-effective, improving water quality and public health for communities across the world. Thank you guys so much, and I'm excited to take your questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paige. And indeed, Rapid Radicals is among the top 25 in this year's Governor's Business Plan contest, which started out with 250 entries back at the end of January. So we're thrilled that moving along. And by the way, this year, 12 of the 25 finalists at this point are from the Milwaukee area, which I think is the largest proportion ever in the history of that contest, which has gone on since 2004. So let me turn to our panelists again. We're talking a lot of water here today. So Dana, what are your observations or thoughts or questions as you heard Paige present?
Thank you. Thank you, Paige. One thing that I was kind of wrestling with in my mind as you were speaking, you mentioned 12.5 billion, I believe was the number that you gave around improvements that municipalities are putting into water. In the event that these catastrophic events happen, how often does the cost actually land with the insurance companies and the actual homeowners versus your target customer, right, which is the actual plant?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we've been working to quantify. Unfortunately, when those kind of events happen in the homes themselves, it's all self-reported, and unfortunately, a lot of insurance doesn't actually cover basement backups. They might cover flooding, but they don't cover basement backups. In a catastrophic scenario, so if we go back to the storms of 2010 and 2011 here in Milwaukee, which is actually what sparked the idea for this technology and this research, around that time, because of all the basements that were flooded and because of all just everything that happened, I believe it was the city, the district, and FEMA actually came in to provide millions of dollars in reprieve for a lot of those homeowners. So I think the important distinction, even though we consider it a market opportunity to say this is the amount of money that's being spent, that money that I mentioned is really just what comes out of the utility to do these capital improvement projects. A lot of that does end up getting funded, I believe about 2/5 of it from ratepayers. So that relationship is not separate. What happens to the homeowner ultimately impacts how they feel about paying rates, which ultimately impacts how much money can be spent to solve these problems, which ultimately impacts how well they can be mitigated for the future.
Okay, that helps. I'm just trying to toggle in my mind the value proposition to how you get your foot in the door and actually get them to act. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
very
Sure,
good.
and I will just amend that real quick and say, this is stuff that people are spending money on no matter what. And I think we're just starting to realize that the typical solution, which would be this massive deep tunnel like we have in Milwaukee, is harder and harder to do in increasingly urbanized areas. So it's harder to build these massive tunnels under a city that is already full of infrastructure under the streets. And so this idea of decentralized treatment hopefully comes up a little bit more now that there's an infrastructure on everyone's tongue these days related to Biden's plan. So it is money that's still being spent. We're just trying to make sure that it's being spent in ways that kind of look at the holistic approach.
Very good.
Thank you.
John Lewis, this is obviously a more mature company. In fact, the only one that's really kind of at a company level right now. What are your thoughts as you look at this?
Yeah, I mean, my initial question was trying to think about that value proposition that you have for the, both for the utilities and then also ultimately for the, the residents and consumers of those services and those areas. And I was one of those victims of the 2010 catastrophic event, and I had 6 feet of water in my basement.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's near and dear to my heart. And although I don't like sewage going into Lake Michigan, I prefer it there than my house, I have to admit. Once you've had 6 feet of water in your basement, you prefer it more in the lake than you do in your house. But my question is really on that timing. So you said it's about 35 minutes to process it through this system, and I don't quite understand what the system is, to be honest with you, and I don't know that it's super important to me at this particular point in time. How would that have mitigated sort of the flow of wastewater into Lake Michigan in a catastrophic event like 2010 versus sort of what they had to do ultimately when they had to flush out the deep tunnel? Just the rain, it was so much rain that even any time spent sort of I assume cleaning it probably would have meant that something would have had to been flushed. And so it's probably just trying to think about that value prop to the, the stakeholders, including the residents in those areas, and think about how they are going to react to sort of spending that money to get some sort of balance of, less pollution going into the lakes versus in their homes versus sort of what they're getting in the current system.
Sure. So
we have about a minute on a really big question. So
sorry, I asked a long question.
So the key, I think, when it's hard, if you think about the system either at the plant or maybe where an overflow would occur, like I showed that picture, or in your home. But the reality is that the way to address this problem is to look at the sewer system overall. And so when we talk to utilities and we're working on building these relationships so that we can really understand their pains and gains. Obviously, customer discovery has been a key aspect of the work that we do. We look at it from a whole system perspective. And so by looking at it from that large perspective, we can see where the areas in the system are really vulnerable. So historic overflows or mostly impervious pavement or high population are already at high flood risk. And you can look at that from a whole system perspective and say, if you were to have a drain at this point, instead of trying to convey water all the way up from Shorewood down to Jones Island or South Shore, where that piping is leaking and it's taking on water, it's getting rid of water. If you can create different drains that actually treat the water without storing it, you alleviate the pressure on the system overall. And that's what will help us avoid having to convey so much water either to the deep tunnel or to a treatment plant. So you get that treatment at a location where you're already really stressed.
very good. Thank you. Thank you, Paige. Well, now I guess we can open here. We don't have a lot of time. We want to make sure we kind of respect all of your schedules, but we could open here for questions from others on any of the presentations thus far, which have really all been fascinating. There is a question, as this is for you, Paige, as an adjacent market, have you considered on-site treatment for harbor, river, PCB remediation projects? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that question opens up a really important topic that I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole broadly, but it's interesting because the nature of the technology that we use is capable of breaking down some of these more complex and more troublesome contaminants of emerging concern. So PFAS has also been on everyone's tongue lately related to upcoming legislation. And so there are markets for us to expand the use of this technology outside of just looking at it for municipal wastewater. We've looked at industrial. PFAS is the focus of our Air Force interests. So something like PCBs could be useful. I don't know that that market's not already relatively saturated, but it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of who we talk to and even understanding how those technologies were chosen, given the fact that there is some capability for crossover with our abilities. That's a good question.
And Paige, this is just for me. PFAS shows up in, as you know, in like firefighting foam, which is often used in training situations, and also in airports. Are airports a potential client for this at all?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've really explored how often the airports are managed on their own versus conveying water to a utility. And in that case, it could be an opportunity, at least for pre-treatment prior to the utility, depending on who manages it ultimately. That's a good point.
Got it. So at this point, I know we're rapidly moving toward a close, but I wanted to get to our panelists here for just an overall reaction about what they've heard today. You know, I was struck by collaboration often across between institutions and beyond with community partners. I'm struck by the fact that almost really all of these presentations somehow touched on a major problem. But your thoughts, Scott, John, and Dana. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, first I'm struck by how much smarter everybody is than me, and so that makes me feel a little bit bad. But really, I mean, it is like all of them are really interesting in their own ways, very different. Like it is you know, I was surprised by so much focus on water. I suppose I shouldn't have been, given the efforts that we've made there. But all of them really tackling, you know, really, really important problems that we face, you know, both as a city and from a health perspective. And, you know, so I just found all of them really interesting, and the you know, the research and the science and the collaboration that people are doing, I think is just really interesting for the city of Milwaukee and the surrounding areas. And it was just, you know, for me, great to see it and be a part of it. I think there's some really interesting stuff in there. You know, it's tangential to what we do, although we are looking a lot at water quality and air quality and those sort of things in the senior living world. And so there's probably some tangential sort of, you know, relevance for us as we go down some of those places to make healthy environments for seniors to age. So sort of interesting sort of to make those connections as well.
Yeah, obviously a big year around senior living and making everything as safe as possible. Dana, your conclusions after hearing all this.
Yeah, same. So this was my first time, Tom. And this is actually really, really cool. I didn't really know what to expect coming in. So I thought that everyone was solving a real problem. I talked to a lot of different startups, and you know, you run into different ideas that probably can make money and they're interesting and everything, but these were real problems that we were hearing from today. So I took some notes, and you know, I may reach out to a couple of folks. I think that the differences in like where everyone was, and like, you know, Kyle started off with something that's like super simple, which I really loved, and, you know, got into more complex technology. So I thought this was a really cool event.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say is I'm an MSOE alum, so I got to say it, that they got to get here somehow.
Oh yeah, well, that's another great institution, and adding to that fabric in Milwaukee. Scott Button, your firm Venture Investors has invested in 40 or so university-based startups over time, some in Madison, some in Michigan, the rest kind of all around the Midwest. So you've seen this and you've seen the potential that come out of these kinds of institutions. Your thoughts in closing?
Yeah, no, I think my colleagues have summed it up well. I mean, these are real problems. They're global problems. They're viable solutions, large market opportunities, just like we see at all the other major research institutions. So, I think, what we're seeing here is on par with, things we see throughout the Midwest. So I think that's really encouraging. I think it's exciting. In general, I love the fact to see translational research taking place. I mean, I understand there's basic science and basic research that's important, but I also think it's really cool that these institutions, a lot of great translational research is taking place, and there's the infrastructure to support entrepreneurship. I mean, just having a great idea doesn't get you to, having a business plan or even beginning to think about, moving it outside the confines of the university walls. So I think that's all fantastic. I say kudos to the presenters here. I thought they had great enthusiasm. They were thoughtful about the markets, and they've been talking and thinking about the commercial opportunities, in some cases engaging with customers. And I think equally important, setting an example for their peers so that we have 10 times as many people the next time around that we do this. So I think it's all really, really positive.
Very good. Well, thank you, Scott. And in closing, before I turn it back over to Jessica Silvaggi, for presenters, congratulations. It's not easy laying yourself out there with a complicated problem and a complicated solution and getting it all done in seven minutes. And to our review panel here, thanks for your input on all of this. And again, thanks to the institutions as well. So back to Jessica for closing thoughts.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I know how much hard work went into this, and it's a unique format that some of you had to practice and get used to. So thank you so much. We are really excited about this event. We hope to continue to have Marquette and other schools we've had join as well in the past. So Tom, hope you'll come back next year. And we actually were recording this event. So we'll find a way, we'll post it on our YouTube channel and share it and so on, so that other folks can see the pictures as well. We want this to hit as far as it can go. So that's it. Thank you. We don't want to take any more time, and just a huge shout out to everyone.
Very good. Thank you, Jessica. All right. Hope to see everybody soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye all.